Welcome, everyone. We're going to get started in just a couple of minutes. Thank you for being early. My clock says 2:59, so we appreciate you. While we wait, we have our question of the day. So in the chat, if you want to answer this series of questions I'm realizing. So first, do you run an after-school meals program? If yes, through which program do you operate it? So CACFP at risk and an SLP snacks, or is it self-funded, so outside of the federal programs? And if no, why? And would you be interested in starting a program? So that's our question of the day. So for those just joining, feel free to drop that in the chat along with your name and location if you feel comfortable with that. I love to see where people are joining from. I'm usually joining from my home office in Pittsburgh, but I am lucky enough to be observing a summer meals program in Burke County, Georgia. So I am in the Burke County, Georgia Elementary School or pre-K through 2 school. I stole a teacher's classroom, don't tell anyone. So we'd love to hear from you. So feel free to put the answer to this question in the chat and we'll get started in just a minute or two. Great to see in the chat some friendly faces. I see some friends and also new folks. So welcome, welcome. And a mix of programs through CACFP, through NSLP, and then other some private donation or private programs. So excited for you all to be here. And we have a packed agenda. So keep answering this question in the chat. Keep introducing yourself. Love to see you all and appreciate you joining. But we're going to go ahead and get started. Okay, so welcome everyone to our final session in our Schools Out Food in Summer webinar series. Today, we're talking all about year-round meals, tips for transitioning from summer to after-school meals. Next slide. A few housekeeping notes. This session will be recorded and slides in the recording will go out via email after the session. So you'll have access to all of that. We do have closed captioning available. So if you toggle to the bottom of your screen, you should be able to access that. And if you have any technical or accessibility issues, you can message Share Our Strength. That's my colleague Chelsea on the back end of things to help with that. Throughout this session, would love to hear from you in the chat. And if you have any questions throughout, please do put those in the Q&A box and we'll get to them at the end of the session during our moderated Q&A. Next slide. Oh, I forgot one last thing. There will be a survey that pops up at the end of when you exit out of the webinar. Please answer and complete those questions. It's a super short survey and we read every single one of the responses and they really are to make these webinars better and more applicable and helpful to you all. So take a few moments, answer those questions. We'll be eternally grateful. And I should introduce myself and welcome you all. So my name is Paige Picorni. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a senior program manager with No Kid Hungry, and I focus on summer and after school meals. Today, after a bit from me, I'll share some resources and talk through some of the differences between summer and after school meals. I'll pass it to our fabulous panelists today. First, we have Maggie Lynch, the Director of Nutrition Services at MetroWest YMCA in Massachusetts. And then second, we have Andrea Garcia, Schoelzel, the Health Initiatives Administrator from Denver's Office of Children's Affairs, in Colorado. So super excited for this awesome lineup. And then of course, we'll have time to interact with you all through that Q&A session at the end. Next slide. Okay, next slide. So I'm going to start us off with the differences and similarities between summer meals or SFSP and SSO, Summer Food Service Program and Seamless Summer Option, and after school meals. I am going to be talking about the Child and Adult Care Food Program At-Risk After-School Meals program, so CACFP at risk. There is another program called the National School Lunch Program Snacks Program. I will not be talking about that today, but we do have resources that I will share later on that talks about that program that does offer snacks. So to set the stage, let's first talk about sponsor eligibility. So primarily, this is the same across programs, which is why they're great opportunities and complements to each other to serve year-round meals. So for both programs, public schools, private nonprofit schools, state or local government agencies, and private nonprofit organizations can all be sponsors of SFSP SSO and CACFP at risk. A couple of differences. The Summer Food Service Program, or SFSP, allows for public or private nonprofit colleges or universities participating in the National Youth Sports Programs, and also private or public nonprofit camps. And then CACFP, of course, allows eligible for-profit childcare centers to participate in the after-school meals component. Next slide. One layer deeper from sponsor are the site types. So both programs allow affiliated and unaffiliated sponsor site relationships. So affiliated are those sites that share sponsors' legal identity with that site, with that sponsor, and unaffiliated is their two separate organizations, two separate legal entities. So think about a school district sponsoring a site at a library. Also the same are they both allow for non-cash agreements, where basically that means the sponsor assumes all costs and retains full meal reimbursement. The difference is, as you all know, if you're running SFSP and SSO, there are different defined site types. So, we have the open and open restricted, closed enrolled, camp, migrant, youth sports programs. And CACFP at risk doesn't have an official site type designations, but programs can be, just generally speaking, drop-in, which kind of operate like open meal sites, open summer meal sites, or enrolled. And one other thing, CACFP at risk allows for cash agreements, where basically the sponsor disperses some reimbursement to the site. Say if the site is procuring and prepping the meals themselves, they could disperse some of that reimbursement minus the administrative fee. Next slide. For site eligibility, primarily the same. So that 50% threshold for students eligible for free or reduced price meals is the same across programs, and eligibility is determined every 5 years. Differences is that CACFP at risk can only use school data for determining area eligibility. So if you remember, SFSP and SSO can use census data and averaged eligibility data through the census data to determine eligibility. So just be careful if you have a site relying on census data, it may not be eligible to participate in CACFP at risk. One other thing is that in non-area eligible sites, we know that SFSP and SSO can become a closed enrolled site and collect free or reduced meal applications. CACFP at risk does not allow non-area eligible locations to participate, but they can by collecting meal applications, but they can participate in the CACFP outside school hours care centers program. However, just a caveat, this only applies for students up to the age of 12. So it's a little more limited in non-area eligible locations. Next slide. Activity requirements. So for the same, need to be supervised. Can't have kids just run around everywhere. What is different though, while we encourage as a best practice activities in SFSP and SSO, CACFP requires regularly scheduled educational or enrichment programming. This can be simple to like a fully formed program. It really varies, it can be as simple as a worksheet. However, children, I do want to say this, children and young people do not need to participate in the activity or enrichment program in order to receive a meal in CACFP. So if they're not interested in the activity, that's okay. They can still eat with you. Next slide. Operational days. So both programs may operate up to 7 days a week. However, they operate at different times, right? Summer meals operates in the summer, of course, but also vacation breaks for year-round schools. And as we know from the past couple of years, unanticipated school closures. But CACFP can only operate during the school year after the school day, so after the school bell rings. However, it can be used on weekends and holidays or school breaks during any time of day. And they can also operate year-round in areas where there are year-round schools. Next slide. Participants, really just a small nuance here. The same is that all children, teens through the age of 18 and persons with disabilities, regardless of age, can participate in both SFSP, SSO, and CACFP at risk. And CACFP at risk, you can actually serve 19-year-olds as long as they were 18 at the start of the school year. Next slide. I know our speakers will be speaking a little bit more about this, so I'll just touch on the fact that there are different meal patterns. However, school food authorities can opt to follow the National School Lunch Program and School Breakfast Program meal patterns in either program instead of the SFSP or the CACFP at-risk program meal pattern. And when you get these slides, that link will be live where you can check out in more details the CACFP meal pattern. Next slide. Meal records. So for both programs, you have to have menus and have those numbers of meals prepared and delivered and served. What's different is SFSP SSO requires some additional documentation on first, second, and leftover meals and non-program adult meals. And CACFP, this is a big difference, requires daily attendance in addition to meal counts. So this can be an attendance sheet gathered by a school, or a roster in a program, or like a sign up if it's a drop-in program, and as simple as a first name, last initial, or even just first name. So this seems like, like a knee-jerk, like, oh, that seems like a barrier to participation, but we found it can be really simple. Kids don't even have to give you their real name if they don't want to. I hope no one from USDA is on. No, I'm just kidding. They should give you their real name, but it really is a simple, what's your name? And then they can carry on with getting a meal or participating in the program. Next slide. So meal service model. So I'm excited to talk about this slide for kind of the first time because in both programs, we know we have the traditional congregate meal site where meals are served on location and consumed on location. Also in both programs, you could have mobile meal programs where pop-up style sites using vehicles that travel across communities. These are still congregate sites, so children still eat on site, but both summer meals and after school allow for that kind of mobile model. What's different and what I'm excited to talk about is that SFSP SSO now has the option of operating non-congregate meals or grab and go to home delivery, that to-go style, in communities without access to a congregate meal site in rural areas. That is not an option yet for CACFP. So all meals in CACFP are eaten on site. Some promising practices I just like to highlight about different meal service models in the CACFP at-risk after-school meals program. First is the umbrella model, which is really thinking about and serving an entire campus or community with an overarching optional enrichment program. So for example, in a school district after the school day, you're offering open tutoring and homework help to all students, and you can serve meals to all students. Supper in the classroom, another great model where meals are served to each classroom. and right after the school day, before kids are really, officially let out to the buses, or the buses arrive, or parents arrive. So that kind of sweet spot, pushing back bus schedules, maybe 15 minutes to get in that quick meal. Next slide. Here are the reimbursement rates, and you can kind of look at these and compare. You can see, as we know, SFSP has the highest reimbursement rate of all the federal nutrition programs per meal. SSO follows the National School Lunch Program reimbursement rates and breakfast program rates. CACFP at risk has its own reimbursement rates, and you'll see here for breakfast, it's $2.21, a lunch or supper, $4.33, and snack, $1.18. This, like $4.03 plus 30 cents to equal the $4.33 for a lunch or supper and CACFP at risk. That is the base reimbursement rate plus cash in lieu of commodities, which the majority of sponsors will take. So you can either take commodity foods or a little extra cash. And you'll see, CACFP is kind of in the middle between reimbursement rates of SFSP and SSO. Next slide. Okay. If we have any state agencies out there, I want to call out this brand new piece of guidance that came out, I think last week, or maybe, just over a week ago, that highlights best practices for streamlining applications for year-round programs. So across SFSP and CACFP, these are for state agencies that are administering both programs, but I read through the guidance. I think there's some really great tidbits in there that can really create some good streamlining across programs and reduce some administrative burden on sponsors. So state agencies, check this out. Next slide. Okay, that was a lot. I promise I only have a few more things to share before we get to our presenters. And as a reminder, please do put any questions you have in the Q&A box, and we'll get to them at the end of the session. So I just want to highlight a few of the resources we have that go through this information in more detail for you all to take home with you. Next slide. So first, just want to call out our website, which is brand newly designed and beautiful. So give that a look. And we have lots of resources, more than what I'm just talking about today. Next slide. So this, I just uploaded it today onto the website. We updated our comparison chart with help from our friends at the National CACFP Association. They added in some additional information on meal patterns. So this is a great guide that compares line by line different regulation sections of CACFP at risk and summer food service programs. So give that a look. Next slide. I'm not going to go through all these. You can see there's a lot of live links, but these will all be live for your viewing pleasure at a later date. But we really have everything on resources from starting an after-school meals program to staffing to navigating area eligibility. Really runs the gamut. Next slide. We also wanted to highlight some really great programming resources because, a program enrichment component is required for CACFP at risk. So these are some resources from our great partners, USDA, of course, and the National Summer Learning Association. Also, just want to highlight, and I know, my presenters might be talking a little bit about this, is how you can partner with local youth serving organizations. So say you have the meal side down pat, but you don't really have that expertise on doing enrichment. That's where partnerships are so key. So partnering with a local organization or even, a couple individuals can really be helpful to add that enrichment component. Next slide. Okay, I think that's all of the after school meals resources. Because we're in summer right now, I definitely want to highlight, if you've missed on past webinars, our Summer Meals Outreach Toolkit. So this has sample social media posts, website blurbs, customizable flyers, and so much more, all available in English and Spanish for download and your use. Totally free, and we definitely want you to use it. Next slide. And we also have live our No Kid Hungry texting line and free meal finder map. So this is a great resources to promote and to offer to families and individuals looking for summer meal sites. So we pull down data from USDA, other pantries nearby, and also state agencies will submit their own site data to us. And so individuals and families can text food or comida for the Spanish version to 304 to find the nearest summer meal site to them. They can also visit those websites, so nokidhungry.org/help or /ayuda. And I will also highlight, we are now, I will send this information out with the updated slides. I need to add it. But you can also find us on WhatsApp. So a really great option for individuals who prefer using that type of texting service. They can visit nokidhungry.org/WhatsApp to find out how to access the same summer meal site information, but through WhatsApp instead of standard SMS texting. Next slide. Okay, and I can't believe we're at the end of our series, but today really is not a farewell, but a see you later. But I do want to highlight all of our webinars are available on our website to view after the fact. So these links are from past webinars and will be live when you get the slides. Next slide. Okay, I was hoping that this was going to be the next slide because I'm done talking. I'm ready for Maggie to take the reins. She's the Director of Nutrition Services at MetroWest YMCA in Massachusetts, and I give the floor to her.
Awesome. Thank you, Paige. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. So I am coming to you live from Massachusetts, from the MetroWest YMCA in Framingham. The next slide, I think, just has a picture of our building and me. Hi. Next slide. I'll jump into a little bit more about our YMCA and what we're doing to provide year-round meals. I will say we haven't always been a sponsor to provide year-round meals. You'll kind of see there was a 4-year gap there. But right now we are sponsoring year-round, which is wonderful. And we'll talk more about the benefits to that. But we started as a CACFP sponsor in 2015. We have a wide variety, as Paige mentioned. There's a lot of different ways that you can sponsor different sites. So we have 2 childcare settings, 5 outside school time sites, and then 5 at-risk sites. So we partner with communities. We also have our own YMCA after-school programs that are run. So we have a nice variety there. We are providing meals 7 days a week. We also are in operation during school vacation weeks. And if there's a no school day, we run program and we're also able to feed our kiddos. And we feed all of our kids family style. So that's one of the wonderful benefits, especially in our childcare setting. We're teaching really great habits at a young age through that family style service. On the SFSP side of things, we were always a site. The public schools actually sponsored us for many years. And then when I came on and took this position, we were able to transition into being a summer food service sponsor ourselves. Which allowed us more flexibility in our menus. At a YMCA, we have kind of a little bit stricter rules where we're trying to be as healthy as possible. So we wanted to have that ownership. And we also wanted to be able to take our services from our YMCA and grow beyond our walls because that's what we're all about here. So we're currently sponsoring 2 camps, 3 sites that are closed enrolled, and then we have 14 open sites, 5 of which are actually mobile routes. And I'll talk a little bit more about all of this. Still operating 7 days a week. Only 2 of our sites are operating 7 days a week out of all of the 19 that we're going to operate. But that's an additional site compared to what we do during the school year. And the difference in SFSP is that because we're a community organization, we cannot offer family style. Only SFAs can do that. So everything does have to be pre-plated and utilized. Go to the next slide, please. So I'm going to talk about meal patterns. I'm a dietitian, so this is my wheelhouse. I get really excited when I can talk about meal patterns in our menus, which I'm going to do both in the next few minutes. It might be really hard to see this, but Paige linked all of the meal patterns in her slides. So there's a few different that I want to talk about. Especially when it comes to our programs here at our YMCA, we're offering programs for kids 12 months through 18 years old. So we have to operate and know all of the differences, especially in CACFP. So you'll see here that there's different categories based on age. So 1 to 2, 3 to 5, and then actually 6 through 18 is all pretty much the same portion sizes or serving sizes. But there is a little bit of a difference there between the categories. So just keeping that in mind. And then within each category, you'll see that the milk, for example, ranges from 4 fluid ounces when you're 1 to 2 year olds, all the way up to 8 fluid ounces when you're a teenager. And that same goes throughout all the meal pattern in CACFP. They kind of just increase as you age. But that's something that you have to be aware of when you're serving, okay? Making sure you're meeting that minimum requirement. When you go into SFSP, it's a little bit different, right? There's just one meal pattern for every kid that you're serving, which is 18 and under. So we do take this into consideration, right? If I'm feeding a 3-year-old versus a 16-year-old, we try to do the best practice of offering something that's actually age appropriate. So if we know that we have a child who is 3 years old, we're obviously going to cut it so it's meeting all the choking restrictions, so not the shape of an esophagus, versus our 18-year-olds who we wouldn't have to cut that food. So just being aware of your audience is really important, and I'll talk a little bit more about engaging your audience and knowing who you're serving, but I think that's the biggest thing. Yeah, just being able to modify with CACFP and SFSP. And actually, I'm not an NSLP operator, but I do know, one of the big differences is that we don't have any color categories that we're trying to meet, especially in the summer. It's just one size fits all. So you have a lot more flexibility in the summer, which can be easier, especially for us where we are operating at such a large capacity in the summer compared to the school year. So that's a little bit that you can see about the meal patterns. And then the next 2 slides, I'm going to show you some examples of our menus and the differences between CACFP and SFSP. So we can go to the next slide. I put in here on the left-hand side, our childcare setting menu, where we're able to serve breakfast, lunch, and a snack, which we cannot do in SFSP. And then you'll see our after-school program menu here. On the right-hand side. So we serve a combination of super snacks and meals. And then in our next slide, you'll see SFSP. So right here, this will show you all of our sites that are getting a breakfast and lunch menu. Some sites in the parks are just getting a lunch, and they can either get breakfast and lunch, or they can get a lunch and a snack, or a supper and a snack. I think the biggest difference here is just that you can't do the breakfast, lunch, and a snack in SFSP like we could for CACFP. Unless you are a camp, a residential camp, you can't do all 3 meal services. So I think our biggest difference as our YMCA is that in our CACFP menus, we do more hot meals. But because we are traveling more to parks and on the go, and it's a lot more permitting through our Board of Health, it is easier for us to do cold. We're working with our Board of Health right now, actually, to be able to do 2 days of a hot menu. But for right now, this is what we're doing. So we can go to the next slide. This is just to show you some examples of what we're cooking in our kitchen. So everything, like I said, is prepackaged and is going out to our sites like this. And we like to have fun and add lots of nice color. So just to give you guys some motivation and some excitement too, as we head into our summer season. So next slide, just going into a little bit more of the differences between CACFP and SFSP. So I put here, community organizations cannot, I already said this, participate in offer versus serve during summer food service program. So during the school year, yes, we can, but during summer, everything is pre-plated and pre-packaged, at least in Massachusetts. So during the school year, it's kids are passing bowls, they're serving themselves, they're learning that intuitive eating, they're learning how to share, they're learning how to communicate with one another. It's beautiful. We do lose that benefit as a community organization in the summer, and we go through a lot more packaging. We do, like I said, it's more cold menus in the summer, which is appropriate, I think, because it is hot out. But I do think every once in a while, a hot meal will really draw those kids in. We are able to offer more local produce on our summer menus. We partner with a local organization called Boston Gleaners, who go to local farms and they're gleaning from things that are left over or not enough staff to pick. So we're able to utilize that in our menus, which is beautiful and incredible and delicious, as you can imagine. Paige mentioned the reimbursement rate for SFSP is higher, which is also a wonderful benefit. Like I said, since we are packaging so much, that extra, every cent counts for us. And then I did just put in here something that can be a little bit more time consuming, is that for CACFP, you are required to have licensed programs. So everybody, at least here, has to have an EEC license. And if they don't have that, you have to do alternate licensing through like building permits and inspections and through the fire department. During the summer, it's a little bit different. You can add sites, and really the only thing that you're looking for is that it is in an area of eligibility, or you're doing enrollment forms for your kids. So those were the biggest differences that I wanted to make a note. As far as I'm concerned, you might have other things that you notice as a big difference that impact your programming. On the next slide here, we're going to talk a little bit about transitioning to year-round service and how do you even do that. So you might be operating as a summer food service site or sponsor, but you're considering like, how could we feed kids year-round? That would be really cool. So how we did it, and kind of, I guess, in the reverse, right? We were CACFP and went to be a sponsor for SFSP, but we went to the community. What is the need? So we were seeing, for our school food service authorities, right? Like, where are you guys, in the summer? How can we add to what you're doing so that we're not duplicating efforts, but we're making sure all the kids in our community have equal access to food? So we started as a sponsor, just filling in gaps for our schools. And with the understanding priority for SFSP does go to SFAs over a community organization. So that's why it's so crucial that you're working with them, not against them. You do have to write your letter of intent to DESE. So we did that with our plan. We've talked to the schools, we've talked to community organizations. Here's what our plan is. There's a handful of trainings, as most of you are probably aware, that you have to go through. Talking to your local board of health. Hey, here's where we're going. We're transporting food, or we're putting it in these sites. What permits might we need? Once everything is planned, obviously, staffing wise, transportation wise, storage wise, if you're adding these sites, where are you going to store the food? Who's vending you your meals? All of these fun considerations. Who's going to be training and monitoring all of your sites? That's something that you have to do year round. But also, how are you going to fund it, right? So these are all things that we had to think about. I would say it's really easy to transition from CACFP to SFSP. I personally find that it's a little bit more fluid. The meal patterns are a little bit easier. The requirements are a little bit simpler. And if you know that CACFP, it's a really simple transition and an easy lift for you to be able to offer this year-round program to your community. And the benefits definitely outweigh any of the setbacks you might, or challenges you might think you'll face. I think in my next slide, I'm going to talk about it right here, actually. So one of the other things that we did to grow and to go year round was to talk to our partners. So we have some local organizations who are in parks already, who are doing, summer enrichment. So we said, hey, you're going there. Can we come with meals to make sure that those kids have access to food? We have a local bookmobile that I'll talk about in a couple of slides that is jumping around the entire city, seeing hundreds of kids a day. Well, can we just come with you and provide meals to all of those kids? So I think also talking to your partners in the community to see like, hey, what's already going on and how can we partner with you to make that happen? It goes a really long way, and it's less of a lift for you. Like Paige said, find someone who's doing the enrichment side and just provide the meals. You can do that year round. So on the next slide, just some benefits to the year-round programming. Obviously, it reduces the risk of malnutrition. If kids are receiving quality, nutritious meals, it's going to decrease their risk for obesity. If they're able to receive that enrichment, which again, through SFSP, it's not a requirement, but CACFP it is. During the summer months, you're reducing setbacks in socialization and educational milestones. If it's during the school year and it's after school, you're providing a really fun way for these kids to decompress after a long day. and they get to eat, which is just so comforting. You do really create a community and trust. That's been one of our biggest things, especially in the summer when we're going into parks. I do not look the same as all the kids I'm serving, and I have to build trust for them to let me come into their neighborhood, right? Without that trust, they're just going to not show up. They're going to say, don't go. That lady doesn't belong here. So you have to build relationships before you just go in and throw food at people. That's a huge lesson we had to learn. So putting on those listening ears to what does the community really need. I put a handful of partners here, but we've had WIC come to some of our kickoff events for SNAP and WIC enrollment. We've had Eversource helping to try and reduce people's bills. Our bookmobile is pictured here. We had our staff come and do food distributions. A local food pantry comes and does food distribution. So we just try to partner with as many people as we can to bring in as many kids and get the word spread to our community, because we can put out advertising and Facebook events, but our community partners are the ones who know these people and can really get them to show up for food. So the last thing I want to talk about on my next slide is just how to grow your program. And again, I'm kind of repeating myself here, but I think it's important, like any relationship in your life, communication and quality, programming, listening, getting feedback, understanding who you're serving. That's all really crucial to a successful year-round program. We are always taking feedback from our partners and from their kids and their programs so that we can change our menus or our enrichment so that it's meeting their needs. If they don't like our food, we're not doing our job and they're not going to keep showing up. So I think that's really important. It takes time and it's hard to do, but it is really important to do. When you're looking for new sites, where are kids congregating? I'm kind of stuck in my office sometimes. I don't get out into the community. So relying on community partners to say, hey, we're really close to this park and there's always kids playing basketball during the summer, on weekends, after school, you should be here serving them meals. So that's kind of how we've added a lot of our new sites. Also, I will say, we're talking with partners. Our summer starts this week and next week for our neighboring community. But, when I'm adding them into our summer food service application, I'm saying, hey, fall's right around the corner. I can be serving your kids in the fall. This doesn't have to just be a summer relationship. And a lot of people don't know that. So I think starting the conversation now is crucial to get their mind turning. And then as you're approaching the fall, it's, hey, remember we had that conversation. Let's talk about how we could actually make it a reality. And then one really great success for us that I just want to share, and then I'll hand it over to Andrea, is we have a great relationship with our school, and a local SMOC actually was in need of a new vendor for their food and for a sponsor. They reached out to our school, who was like, we just are at full capacity. We can't do that. But our local YMCA is always willing to take on sites. So we got a referral from our school system, which is like the greatest compliment in the world. But that's how you get your new sites, right? You have a good reputation, you create these relationships, and then you can bring on new sites. So we're always talking to people about our food programs. The community doesn't know what they don't know. So if that information is not out there, they don't know that you can provide that service. So I think don't ever be afraid to share your story and get it out there, and you never know what will come out of it. We're getting an extra 500 kids a day because of one referral from our school. So really incredible. So I would say start the conversations early and continue the conversations, and it's just going to be an easy way to transition from your summer food service into your child and adult care food program. And I think that is all I have. So Andrea, sending it over to you.
Okay, well, thanks, Maggie. And hello, everyone. My name is Andrea Garcia Schoelzel. I serve as the Health Initiatives Administrator for the Office of Children's Affairs here in Denver, Colorado. I'm so happy that, and I guess I'm making a jump here, but that if you're on this webinar, you're at least mildly curious about the possibility of becoming a year-round sponsor, which is really exciting. I think that in a lot of ways, you need to make it your own. And so I'll jump back to that concept in a moment. But first, I'll share with you a little bit of the history of how we became a year-round sponsor. So if you can go to the next slide, please. We first began sponsoring the summer food service program in 2012. And we did this as a pilot. It went so well that first summer that immediately we became a CACFP at-risk after-school sponsor that next fall. And so in the first several years of operating as a year-round sponsor, it was just my supervisor and I. So it was a two-woman operation here at headquarters, and we just, took on more and more as we were able to build our team little by little. Currently, we serve well, let's see. Sorry, let me back up. So we have been serving as a year-round sponsor of sites for the past 11 years. And it's amazing because I'm still learning best practices around how to be a year-round sponsor. So just an encouragement that the learning never ends. It's, there's always ways we can do things more efficiently, more effectively to better serve the young people in our communities. But I would say, just anecdotally, that there was a lot of information shared on this webinar, a lot of really good information, but a lot of information at that. And so I just want to encourage you guys to get with your state's agency. For our state, during the summer months anyway, it's the Colorado Department of Education, and during the school year, the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. And so we navigate working with two different state agencies throughout the school year. That being said, I have become I don't know, I would say besties with with our sponsor state liaison, because I'm constantly sending them questions and asking them, is this how this runs during the summer? Is this how we should, is this what is required during the school year? And so just encouragement that when you pursue your particular state agency, they'll be able to walk you through step by step how to transition from maybe sponsoring summer meals only or school meal years only to operating year around. We currently sponsor 21 year-round sites, and our goal is to eventually sponsor 40 plus year-round sites. But we know that is a work in progress. Our site types include recreation centers, and those are open to the public, libraries, and those are also open to the public, and then several community-based organizations. Those are mainly closed enrolled sites, but some actually serve the public as well as registered program participants. Okay, let's see, I'd say, well, let's hold off real quick on going to the next slide. I want to say that as a year-round sponsor, there are some ways that we have streamlined our processes, which have been very helpful in serving as a year-round sponsor. And so they include site visits. So as many of you know, a year-round site requires 3 site visits annually, or maybe you don't know that. And so year-round sites require 3 site visits annually. Thankfully, 3 sites CACFP requires sites to be visited 3 times annually. What's the benefit of being a year-round site is that we can conduct a summer site visit and have that count as a CACFP site visit as well. I hope that made sense. So instead of 4 site visits in total, it's streamlined to 3, which is much more doable for a small team. We've also been able to streamline training. And so instead of site staff needing to take a summer specific training or an after school snacks and summer specific training, we are able to provide 1 training annually. And within that training, we touch upon the differences between the 2 programs. I think one thing that's important to note is that to the community that you're serving, it just looks like you're providing food resources year round. On the back end, we know that there's differences between SFSP and CACFP. But to our audience, we want to make this as seamless as possible. And so another way we streamline our work internally is by only collecting original paperwork once per year for year-round sites versus collecting summer paperwork at the end and then school year paperwork at the end. I would say we have made year-round sites work because we've implemented a 2-week break twice a year. So when the school year ends, right before summer meals begin, we take a 2-week break to close out the school year and prep for summer. I mean, keep in mind, we've been prepping for summer since probably early March. I'm sure you guys start earlier than that even. But then we also take another 2-week break at the end of summer to close out summer meals and to prep for the school year. And so that has really allowed us to transition between the 2 rather seamlessly as well. I think that also really helps our site staff to have a little bit of a breather because you are asking more of them when they're serving year-round meals. To have a breather, to reset, to begin serving meals once again each season. Okay, if we could transition to the next slide. I'd like to touch upon this first point, and providing year-round meals allows for consistent access to food resources for youth. Similarly to what Maggie had touched upon, that malnutrition is an ongoing challenge. I know that I'm stating the obvious in that hunger doesn't take a break. It doesn't know that summer's over and so school, and so meals at their local recreation center, library, etc., won't be needed any longer. And so for that reason alone, it's a worthy consideration to see if you can become a year-round site. I would say this. I would say the one sponsor doesn't have to be all year round or all seasonal. I know that during the summer months, we take on libraries that actually don't operate year round because they have challenges during the school year with documenting a youth's first and last name. And so that's something that we need to work with them on to become year-round sites. But our recreation centers, they are all about serving year-round. And so we just work with each site individually to determine what is the best strategy. There's also one particular recreation center that comes to mind that serves very low numbers during the school year for whatever reason. However, they have an outdoor pool during the summer months, and they are serving meals like gangbusters. And so, it is more fitting for them to be a summer only site. And so just approach it site by site. I think that, becoming a year-round sponsor, you have to make it work for you. And so, maybe you're thinking, gosh, I want to try it, but can we truly do it? I would just say take a pilot approach and consider, working with 2 summer sites, 2 to 5 maybe, to see about them coming on as school year sites as well. And maybe if most of your sites serve 4 hours during the summer, maybe during the school year they have a 1 or 2 hour serving window, and that allows you to operate during the school year. So all that to say, I just want to encourage you to make it work for you. There is ease of training and site expansion, like I mentioned. I would say, let's just say, hey, you're already on board with becoming a year-round sponsor. Now is the really fun part, in that you get to determine how to grow. And so I would encourage you to, like Maggie had mentioned, get with the other major sponsors in your community and see where their sites are located throughout the school year, so that you can plan your site expansion with intentionality, to really get at those pockets during the school year, or vice versa during the summer, where food resources are truly needed and maybe not accessible at this time. I think that one of the most important things is that longevity in a community. If a community knows that during the school year, during the summer months, they know where to go to access youth meals, that it will help grow the participation of your meal programs. And then I lastly wanted to just touch upon our ability to provide weekend and or holiday meals throughout the school year. And that has been a tremendous benefit to kids in our community, especially because as we work closely with our school district at times, I know this past winter break, they weren't serving meals, nor I believe this past spring break. And so even on their platforms, their website, they were able to direct kids to tasty food sites, which is what we call our free meal sites for youth. And so we were able to provide meals, nonstop during the 2 weeks that kids were off for Christmas and New Year's, and then the 1 week for Thanksgiving and the 1 week for spring break. And so with that, I will pause and just open it up for Q&A. I know, Paige, you're gonna lead us in that. And so please, we wanna learn and hear from you. And so put your questions in the chat, and thanks so much.
Thank you, Andrea. Thank you, Maggie. I love listening to you both present. I always learn something new. So thank you. And yes, as Andrea said, please put your questions in the chat in the Q&A box. We're here to answer them. We have about 8 minutes, so we have plenty of time. I do want to clarify a question or point of clarification came in the chat earlier. So this is on the cash in lieu of commodities piece. So that extra 30-some cents that goes along with your lunch or supper reimbursement for CACFP at risk. So it's very rarely used, and therefore many states have actually just said, okay, we're actually only going to offer the cash in lieu of commodities. So I think that's where you might have heard from your state agency that it's no longer available, because it's probably no longer available in your state. So just wanted to clarify that. And yes, please put your questions in the Q&A box. Otherwise, I have a list of questions for you both. So I'll give it a second or two, and then I'll ask a question. Okay, I'm going to ask a question. I'm curious about what types of, I'm going to ask, okay, so we do have a question in the chat, and I do want to be respectful of our audience before I dig into my question. So how can we grow into year-round meal programs if we are a school district and that is an SSO sponsor site? More of a staffing question. So I'm actually going to kick this off. I'll start answering in. Andrea, Maggie, if you have any other points, love for you to jump in. So great question. So as a school district, I know many who have implemented CACFP at risk. So the benefit of doing CACFP at risk over NSLP snacks is that you can provide a full 5-component meal with CACFP at risk. You can also serve on weekends and holiday breaks. But first, obviously becoming a sponsor of the program. And in terms of staffing, I know a lot of schools use a much smaller staffing structure and will maybe do all of their prep and meal preparation in one location and then satellite it off to other school other school sites across their district rather than doing on-site preparation and everything, because that's just a lot to do for both lunch and supper. Another thing I know schools will do is do a lot of their supper prep while they're doing their lunch prep and utilize a lot of the same ingredients and components of their meals so that really, you only need 1 or 2 people during that after school time to serve the meals to kids. And sometimes it could be in the cafeteria. Often I've heard from districts too, taking it out of the cafeteria to another central location, say the lobby or something, where, it only requires, again, that one staff person to do the counting and claiming right there at the point of service. And then kids can take off to their various drama club, basketball practice, all of the things they can kind of disperse across the way. Andrea, Maggie, do you have anything to add? I know you're not school district, so.
Yeah, similarly to one of Maggie's examples, the Denver Public Schools allowed us to sponsor a in-school program and serve meals after school there for their after school program. And so if it's a real challenge for the school district themselves to become a year-round sponsor, but want to be able to provide food resources at their school for kids after school, that's a great way to collaborate with another sponsor in your area.
Yeah, great point. If you don't have the staffing capacity, that partnership piece, leveraging those community partners like Andrea's, like Maggie's in your community that, are already CACFP sponsors to come into your school. We have time for 1 or 2 more questions. I will just note that the slides and webinars, we always get this question, will be emailed out after the webinar. So please stay tuned for that. And if there aren't any more questions, I will ask, since we only have a couple more minutes, two questions. First, what do you think has been the biggest challenge in navigating these 2 programs? Not necessarily a transition, but really just you're operating 2 complicated federal nutrition programs. What has been your biggest challenge? And then 2, why do you overcome it? Why do you continue to operate and work really hard on operating these programs?
Maggie, you're on mute.
I saw you on mute, so I said, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I want to hear from you, Maggie.
So biggest challenge page that we've had for open sites. So I think I'm trying to think now before I just sputter out, but I mean, biggest challenge is always, do we have staff and capacity? I think, right. If we're partnering with a new site, making sure we have the staff to get them trained and do our monitoring for them. But I always like to say yes to adding new sites. So I feel like I'm never like, nope, can't do that. It's always just like, yes, we'll do it. But like, how do we get to making that actually operate? So yeah, I would say just making sure you have the staff and the space to do it would be our biggest, my biggest things I'm thinking about first. Always create an MOU with any partners that you're taking on. I know sometimes when we have new partners, they don't fully understand, like there's XYZ has to happen and this type of communication has to happen. So I think those are my biggest things, is just set up MOUs, train everyone thoroughly, and then everything should operate pretty smoothly.
In the last 30 seconds, I would just mention that it's all hard work, whether you're a year-round sponsor or a seasonal sponsor, but it's different in that year-round work is much more around maintenance, but the benefits there are, staff that have been trained and with your program for a long time stay usually like have the program down. Whereas when you're seasonal, you have to do a lot of setup and a lot of closeout. And that could be really a lot of, very challenging as well. And so it's kind of maintenance work versus setup and closeout work. It's all hard work. But I think year-round sites, if I may be biased, but they actually are a little easier. And I'll end on that.
I love that. Amazing. Thank you so much, Andrea. Thank you so much, Maggie. Fantastic presentations. And thank you for being our final speakers in our series. Way to close it out. A few final things to wrap us up. Next slide. All right. If you aren't connected with us and somehow this just appeared on your calendar, definitely do sign up for our newsletter. That's where all of our updated new upcoming resources, webinars, grant opportunities are. And you can do that at bestpractices.nokidhungry.org/subscribe. And then of course, visit our website, which is now newly designed, really awesome. So highly recommend to take a peek. Next slide. And again, just wanted to plug our survey that will pop up when you exit the screen. Please take a moment to complete it. It's super short. We read it for every single answer, and it really does inform webinars for the future. So with that, I think the next slide is just my contact information. I'm here as a resource. I know Andrea and Maggie are here as a resource too. So thank you for joining with us today, and have a great summer. We'll see you in the fall for more about after school meals, school meals, all of the things. But I just want to thank you all, especially if you've been joining us since the beginning of the summer webinar series, for joining us on this journey. And we appreciate you and all you do to serve kids in your community. So thank you, Andrea. Thank you, Maggie. And thank you, everyone. I hope you have a great day, and we'll talk soon.